Nei Ruffino, thank you very much for coming on the Pay to Play podcast.
That's awesome.
Tell me, what are you digging right now? What things have you encountered recently that you've absolutely enjoyed doing, or what are you looking forward to doing whenever you get the opportunity?
Well, some of the stuff I've been really digging, been reading a lot. Again, this Magician series by Lev Grossman is pretty awesome. New music is Zoo, been really into them, ZHU. And, just pretty much traveling and, other things like that. I haven't had a ton of time for my own personal art, but I'm really looking forward to working on my next series, Azure.
I've been seeing a little bit about that on your Patreon page. I get the feeling that Azure is a real labour of love for you. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Well, it's essentially the story of this girl who, I should start back. It's actually kind of based on a dream that I had, which is really interesting, but didn't really have a lot of substance as far as a short story goes. But my friend Pat Chan took it and turned it into a beautiful 21-page story, one-shot story. And it's essentially this girl who really doesn't really know where her place in the world is, feels a little depressed. And when she finds her own way, kind of, the weight of the world is lifted and she learns how to fly.
So from the sounds of it, it's a bit more metaphorical rather than the usual thing that you almost expect to see in these stories where the person who feels a bit lost and confused about their place in the world suddenly winds up having it revealed to them that they've got a great destiny, and they're prophesized, or they're of a special bloodline or anything like that. It sounds just like more of a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, it's actually something, it doesn't go too far because it's only a one-shot story. So it's, at the basic, you know, easily readable level where nothing is, too hidden or whatever, anything like that.
Mm. It sounds almost like a refreshing change of pace where people nowadays seem to expect that comic books are going to be these serialized, monthly, almost soap opera-y things, and being able to just tell a story in one book. I guess it must be a bit liberating in a way.
Yeah, it's really actually why I got into comics. I had so many these little stories, and they turned out to be just fun little projects. But there's something really there. But in the end, they're kind of inspired by something like Weird Tales or Outer Limits, sort of Twilight Zone almost kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. But talking about getting into comics, if you don't mind, let's see if we can skip back a little bit. When did you, do you remember when there was a moment that you actually realized that you loved comic book art and creating it yourself?
Not so much. I mean, there's a story I've been working on since I was 11 that, when I first started drawing pages, when you're 11, it's really hard. And I
Mm.
said, I never wanted to work in comics when I was 11. And then came full circle. And now I'm actually going to make that a huge series and hopefully put it out through Aspen in the end that, is morphed into this huge thing. But, wanting to draw one specific scene from that book actually led to my series, The Secret Life of Crows, because I wanted to create a comic and I had never drawn pages before. So I did the first part as sort of a, scratch the itch sort of thing, and ended up just causing a whole big thing. And now I could never live without that again, I don't think.
So you, from the sounds of it, you uncorked the bottle and the genie came out, and of course, you don't want to even put it back.
Exactly.
So, when you started doing that initial work on actually creating comic book pages, did you have all that many resources available to you to kind of show you how it usually gets done to, make life a little bit easier for you in those early days, or?
Well, definitely. I have a lot of contacts. Raven Gregory, actually, who wrote the series for me, pretty much had connections in every way that I could, hope for. He even got, a article with USA Today and everything for the book.
Hmm.
And I've been pretty involved in the process over at Zenescope, quite closely as an art director and whatnot at times. So I kind of knew generally what went into it, as
Yeah.
well as listening to guys like Mark Silvestri give portfolio reviews to people for, my first few years and then other people later on makes you kind of realize, the key things to really look, for when you're creating a comic.
Mm. So tell me a little bit about those early days. I mean, how did you get in to the industry?
Well, I was actually a tattoo artist, and
Mm.
in 2006, I was coloring a work of a friend of mine, David Frederick, or Strauss, yeah, and he was doing, we were doing a few things just for free and fun, whatnot. And I kind of had a feeling that I should go to San Diego that year. A bunch of my friends were going, and it sounded like fun. And I found out that the thing to do was to take portfolios and just hand out packets and, see if you have any bites.
Mm.
And I got a few, and one of them was that Devil's Due needed a really big, or really, really badly needed a colorist to fill in on this book that they were doing called Dragonlance. And so I tested for that, and they gave me 2 pages. I finished one and sent it in, and they hired me before I even finished the second.
Congratulations. And by San Diego, I assume you're talking about San Diego Comic-Con, is that right?
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Sorry, I should have been more specific.
That's quite all right, no worries. So, that testing process, from the sounds of it, that is something that anyone who pitches their work to a major comic imprint pretty much has to go through, right? So is that what's involved in that? What do you get given in terms of how do they communicate to you what they expect you to hand in at the end of the day?
Well, if it's a series you're taking over from somebody else, you'll have the previous pages of something, at least the quality they are expecting. And of course, all the reference you need. The larger companies pay you for those pages whether or not you actually get the job. And the smaller companies just say, sorry, or, you get the job.
Mm.
And it's pretty common, especially for low level, entry level, I should say, colorists and artists that, they want to see what you have
Mm.
to offer.
Now, what exactly makes the colorist job unique and a separate role in the process of creating a comic book?
Well, essentially, down to the wire, the deadline usually falls on the colorist's shoulders, which is a little bit of a different thing. That's definitely one of the smaller cons of the job is that, the penciler does his thing, and then if he's, taking his time and just enjoyed his life a little bit, and then the inker goes and does the same thing. By the time the colorist is doing it, it's sometimes hours before the actual print deadline. That the book's actually being finished.
Yeah, just pretty much right before it goes to press, you've got the having been in the newspaper industry a little bit myself, I kind of understand what the process that you're talking about there. And before even, of course, the penciler and the inker, the darn thing had to have been written as well. So,
Yeah.
so the colorist really is at the sharp end of the deadline flow, from the sound of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it can be a really tricky thing.
Mm. And and that is where you came in. You didn't start earlier. You entered the industry at that sharp end.
Yeah, it's definitely, quite the burden. But as a colorist, even jumping in, I was already doing, 3 books a month within the first 3 months of my career. So it was quite a schedule
Yeah.
jumping in.
Having been part of the field, what is the usual workload? Is that sort of expected for a colorist in the comic book industry, having to work on? And I guess when you're talking about 3 titles a month, that's about what, 25 pages worth of comic book per title
Yeah.
per month. So about 75 fully colored. And of course, when we get a comic book, it's this fairly small piece of work, but I guess you've got to work on an actual size that's at least 3-4 times that kind of.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's well, I mean, you don't have to do that. I definitely jumped right in that way, but as a comics colorist, you're expected to finish a book in anywhere from you should be able to finish a book in at least 7 days.
Right.
And I was doing them in anywhere from 3 to 6 generally.
So you must have built yourself one heck of a reputation earlier on.
I definitely, was one of the hardest working people anybody knew back then. I mean, I
Yeah.
still am a little. I mean, you find more time back for life after it's hard to work back from working that much, I should say.
Yeah.
But it's, you can't really enjoy things too much. I was working, 7 days a week and maybe 12 hours a day.
I have spoken to someone else who's an independent comic book artist himself, and from what I gather, it is a very all-consuming job. It doesn't seem to allow you much time for sanity breaks and the like. Is that the case?
Yeah, generally not, but I would also do a lot of conventions. So when I went away on the weekend, it was like sort of a vacation because I wasn't setting up in the beginning at tables and such.
Um, and
But
so you're pretty much.
definitely like
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's definitely a bit of locked away in the dungeon sort of mentality after you had long stretches.
And so you were pretty much working, of course, as you said, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And in your breaks, you were actually attending places like Comic-Con and a lot of the pop culture events. So it sounds like for a good while after you got started, you were pretty much living, breathing, and sleeping the world of comic books.
Yeah, for sure. And always working harder and trying to get I had it in my head for a while that I would work for as many companies as possible at one time and really just maximize my exposure, and it seemed to work
Yeah.
for sure.
Now, I think at least from my exposure to you, you are most known for your work with Zenescope and their grim fairy tales titles and the like. But you have also done cover work, etc., for Marvel and DC. So, how many companies have you worked with, all up, would you say?
I think it's technically everything except for, I mean, all the, out of the bigger publishers, everything except for Vertigo. I
That,
mean, in one form or another.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's who haven't I worked for?
And the last I remembered it, Vertigo, and my apologies for maybe being a little bit out of touch. I thought Vertigo was a DC imprint anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I've done over 200 projects for DC, but not nothing Vertigo specific.
Ah, right. Um, so what was life like before you actually got into the industry yourself? Presumably you had been to a few cons. You mentioned that you've been to San Diego Comic-Con. On the fan side of the fence, what was it like transitioning from there to being a guest of conventions? Was there time also that you actually that you did have to? I think you mentioned that you weren't doing tables, so you didn't ever have to set up a booth yourself. Was that the case?
I actually traveled and did a lot of conventions with Zenescope or my friend Eric Basildua. Things like that, and would just go network a lot, and hang out. And that's actually where the real work came from, is because when you can meet somebody, your editors face to face, and hang out and have dinner with them, it's vastly different than just trying to email people and say, hey, I'm available. So I did that for about 4 years, I guess, just going to cons on my own dime, and it definitely makes a big difference.
Does attending a con yourself, what are of course the no doubt the show floors are of absolutely full, not with just people who are keen to get their work out there and known to the various publishers, but of course it's also full of regular guests and straight up fans and the like. How do you actually go about differentiating yourself from the regular guest and getting that face time with people who you otherwise wouldn't have a chance to meet. I imagine that, having dinner after a con with an editor for a comic book label is not the most easy thing to do.
No, for sure. It kind of comes down to, comics. The industry is almost a who do you know at first, and, it makes a big difference. I got, some contacts pretty early on and whatnot. But, as a colorist, like that was the hard thing becoming a guest at, because nobody wants to bring a colorist. It's always the penciler and the writer team, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, Raven actually really early on pushed really hard for me to get, to these cons as a guest. And once that started happening, you kind of fall in with the crowds, or the people I'm coloring. I'm doing dinners with them and then meeting the editors that way and whatnot. And like I say, it's networking is a very important thing.
Mm. Now, tell me, especially after being an industry professional for a good while, what is it that drove you back to? You have a very strong line in the independent comic scene, and you are very keen on supporting indie talent. What brought you back there, and especially what brought you back to paying it forward in that sense of doing the live streams of your work and then, setting up your Patreon page? I mean, it sounds like you, especially as you are an established name in the industry, and you are, presumably not shy of work on that front.
No, and I think that's where part of that comes from, trying to give it back, because, I've definitely got more work than I can handle.
Hmm.
Paying the knowledge forward, and especially because most of the stuff that I've learned I got off of internet tutorials and tips and critiques from people online myself. So I feel like that, like the Patreon in a sense is to support me while I could be working on these tutorials and things that don't otherwise bring me income. But at the same time, the knowledge is, if you were to go to an art school, it's much more expensive. And it's essentially, you think about it, almost free.
Indeed, yeah. How, from the sounds of it, Patreon itself has been very successful. How have you found embracing crowdfunding? How's it worked for you, and what are some of the new skills that you've had to learn, perhaps the things that you've found challenging?
Well, I'm actually, what I probably will find challenging is actually narrating to my coloring work and whatnot for the videos that I'm going to be offering on Patreon. But the tutorials that I'll be writing and stuff for the first time are probably going to be the biggest challenge, and make it understandable and, useful to somebody that may not be on the same level as the next person, whatever.
How do you find driving Patreon on a goals front? I mean, I have a Patreon myself. It is very modest, and it's only just hit its first funding goal, which is the spectacular amount of $10 an episode. Which, of course, from my perspective, I'm very happy with, because I've got 3 people paying me to do something which is otherwise available for free, and it covers my basic hosting costs. Looking at your Patreon page, you have got 48 people backing you over $800 US a month, but you've still yet to hit your first milestone goal. How do you actually how have you found getting your Patreon page out there and encouraging people to sign up, and what are you doing to work toward those goals?
We're actually, been doing a lot of traveling. I keep saying we, sorry. It's me and my Martin. But, I want to be, eventually want to offer some sort of, sign up for Patreon, get a free print sort of deal at cons. We've been promoting it mostly at conventions because we've been doing so much traveling. But that part of the convention year is about to end, so we're going to really dive into the Patreon and do, just try and fill it with a lot more content and exclusive stuff that nobody else can have. Hopefully, we'll bring people.
Fantastic. No, it's always that feeling of being able to get something that no one else has, or at least being able to get it first, that brings a lot of people in, isn't it?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, definitely. Because, I've realized my fans really are into that sort of, fan club sort of mentality with this stuff.
Mm. Well,
Like it's kind of deal.
yeah, actually, that is something that I would like to ask you about. Tell me a little bit about that support that you've had. I mean, it must be the most incredible thing to go from being a fan of something to not just being established, but also discovering that you have an entire fan base of your own. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience and perhaps, without perhaps asking you to play favorites, but some of the people who you have encountered through them coming up to you and saying that I am a huge fan of your work and who have got behind you as you've progressed?
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few people. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to really name names or whatever. Nobody knows, but
Mm.
I really value these people, and they, essentially have become almost, con buddies. Like I've definitely like started building more of a friendship with some of them and whatnot. And it's just a wonderful thing. I feel like, at first it was really weird, and when people were really like nervous to talk to me, and it never like. I don't know, like I've been pretty humble, I guess, and I still don't really know how to deal with it too much.
Mm.
But I think of them more as, I start thinking of them more as friends, than fans in the end.
Yeah. It must be an interesting thing, as you say, with that experience. You sit there or you go about your day and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're just Nei, and
Yes.
but to all these people out there, you're Nei Ruffino, and that's there's this incredible other you that you don't perhaps recognize in yourself, but um, that you're known for being somehow. That seems to be sort of like one of the most amazing things. After say for example, a name that I've no doubt you're very familiar with, and that some friends of mine who are comic book fans tend to talk about J. Scott Campbell. I guess there was perhaps a time then when he was sort of like he was J. Scott Campbell, and now that you've worked with him and known him for a while, he's just a regular guy who does comics the same way you do.
Yeah, for sure. When I first met him, I actually wasn't honestly not too familiar with his work, and then I realized that, oh no, I totally read Danger Girl, and totally read when he worked on Gen 13, and so. But aside from that, it would kind of all of a sudden almost dawned on me how big of a name he was, and it was definitely like a little nervous. Like every time I was around him, I was like, "Who? There's Scott. Oh, hi, Scott." Sort of thing. And then, now that we've been working together, I guess for almost 6 years now, it's, been really amazing. And, we definitely consider him one of my friends.
So to touch a little bit on the living the dream aspect, what are some of the things that being a comic book colorist and of course an artist as well, and being known in the industry, what are some of the things that they have allowed you to do? Some of the opportunities that you've received, especially the ones that you perhaps weren't expecting.
Well, yeah, definitely my apartment, which is, it's one of the nicest places I've ever lived, and it's not something that's most, conventional for a lot of people. It's a pretty comfortable living and whatnot. Great environment to create, which is I feel very important.
Mm. And I have to ask: has the overall schedule in terms of creating eased for you at all, or are you still very much cranking it out 7 days a week, 12 hours a day?
Well, definitely not 12 hours a day, but generally 7 days a week if I'm home.
Mm.
I'll try and do a little bit of something every day. Generally, I have to do, layouts or something for a cover at least. But I try not to I actually gave myself tendinitis about 3 years ago,
Ah.
and it has forced me to slow down.
Mm.
It became very difficult to work more than 4 or 5 hours a day for a while there, and it was really difficult. I actually called in the assistance of Eagle Goslin, which is a budding colorist that's going to be starting in the industry very soon, and he as my assistant, because it was just all of a sudden too much work, and I was committed to lots of things.
Mm. So,
But now it's more managing just your time, and yeah.
mm. So, well, actually, on that subject of managing your time, what does a working day in your life sort of look like at the moment? What are the things, or perhaps even extend that out to a week? What are the things that you have to do on a regular basis as part of your routine?
Well, lately it is doing the sketches for Patreon. I've been doing art book commissions, and like I drew and started coloring a cover last night, finished coloring it this morning. I have to draw another one when I'm done with you, and then possibly color another piece for eBass. But in between these things, I try and take breaks. I play video games and whatnot just to give my wrist a little bit of rest.
Okay, look, just have a quick geek out. What are you playing at the moment?
The Last Remnant. It was a PlayStation 3 game, I think, but I'm playing it on Steam on my computer.
Ah, right. Any long time loves in the video game world? Any things that you keep coming back to, or just games that you have fond memories of?
Definitely Final Fantasy Nut.
Final Fantasy
And
IX.
no, Nut.
Oh,
Sorry, I
Nut.
said Nut.
Okay.
Nine is all right. But I enjoy games like that a lot. I've been playing a lot of Civilization style world games as well.
I know some folks who call those games time machines because you
Oh
start
yeah,
playing, promise you're only going to be in there for a couple of hours, then you look up and it's morning the next day.
yeah, because you finish it. You're like one more turn. Okay, one more turn. One
Yeah.
more turn. Just 2 hours.
I know the feeling. If there were three things that, looking back, you wish perhaps someone might have told you when you were getting started out that would have made your getting to where you are now a little bit easier, that perhaps you could pass on to somebody else who is now where you were then, what would those three things be?
That cherish your fans, but when it comes down to it, don't let it ruin your happiness when you get a sourpuss that doesn't like your work or something like that, because it's definitely like a mental setback that does nothing and everything works out just fine, and eventually you do figure out that you take those things with more of a grain of salt.
Mm.
Literally. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like your work.
Yeah. Yes, look, you can burn the comic book all you like as long as you buy it first, please.
In the industry, never burn a bridge because
Mm.
you never know what's going to, the ripple of that, whatever happens.
So, after hearing this episode, where can anyone who is now, and I am sure it is absolutely ready, everybody who's listened to this episode and is keen to look you up and find out more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Well, my main website is organicmechanic.com, and organic with a K at the end, not a C. And my Patreon page is a big thing going on, of course. That's patreon.com/Nei Ruffino. And for the artists that like to just, I have a huge gallery on my DeviantArt page. My name on there is Tool Kitten.
Well, Nei Ruffino, thank you very much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the Pay to Play podcast, and I can tell you for certain that in doing so, you have made the day of at least one comic store owner in Cairns who actually, I'll drop his name, Mal Simmons of Black Comics and Collectibles. He has been following your streams and your videos for years and reckons he's learned a ton about drawing and colouring from them. And he basically just asked at one point, when I asked him who he'd like on the show, if I could get you on, and was I think I managed to blow his mind when I said, Mel, guess what? She said yes.
Yay! Well, you're welcome.
No worries. And thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.